Welcome back. My name is Murphy. I am your host for Stories from the Diaspora. In the last episode, I spoke about Anansi and how the Anansi stories made their way from Ghana to the diaspora, wherever Akan people were enslaved, and among their descendants. Now I'm going to share with you how the stories got their name, the Anansi stories. Many, many, many years ago, in the area now known as Ghana, among the Akan people, there was Anansi, the original Spider-Man. Anansi is also known as a trickster. Now, in those days, all the stories belonged to Niame, the sky god. Niame owned all the stories, and Anansi was not happy about that. Anansi wanted the stories named after him, Anansi. Now, Niame was all powerful, and Anansi was a little scared, timid. But Anansi never said never. He spoke to his wife, and she said, "Go for it, go and talk to Niame." And so Anansi plucked up his courage. He spun his web up to where Niame lived in the sky. And he said, "Niame, I am your poor, humble servant, Anansi, and I am here to ask if you can name the stories that you own, the Anansi stories." And Niame was amused. He said, "Oh, little Anansi, look at you. You're so little, and you want the stories named after you." And Anansi said, "Yes, please." And so Niame, being very confident that Anansi would never be able to complete the task that he would set for him, he said, "Oh yes, Anansi, I will give you 4 tasks. Bring me a nest of hornets. The hornets whose stings are like needles. Bring me the python, the giant python. Bring me the leopard, the fierce leopard, and bring me the invisible fairy." And when Anansi heard that, his heart quailed within him. But he was brave. So Anansi said, "Thank you, thank you." And he spun his web back down to earth. He went and he spoke to his wife. And his wife said, "Let's think about it. Let's think about it. We can come up with a good idea." And Anansi and his wife spoke. Well into the night, they plotted, they planned, and next day, Anansi carried out the plan that he and his wife had come up with. He went to where he knew there was a hornet's nest, and he was prepared with a gourd with a cover. He poured water over their nests, and when they flew out, he said, "Oh, it's raining, but come and take shelter here." And he held the gourd up, and the hornets flew in, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And when they were all in the gourd, Anansi covered it. And the hornets were upset because now it was dark and they were captured in the gourd, and they said, "Let us out! And Nancy said, not on your lives. And he spun his web back up and said, Nyame, here are the hornets. And Nyame was surprised, but he thought, okay, he's done one thing. Oh, and Nancy, you managed to get a nest of hornets. Excellent. Now, let's see, you get me the python, the leopard, and the invisible fairy. And then Nancy quickly went back down. He went to his wife, and they plotted and they planned and they plotted and they planned. And next day, Nancy went walking through the forest where he knew the python lived, talking to himself, and said, she's wrong. No, I don't believe it. There is no other python longer than this python. And the python was listening. And he said, Nancy, who are you talking to? And Nancy said, oh, pardon me. I didn't know you were here. Of course, he knew very well that the python was there. I was having a conversation with Mrs. and Nancy. And I told her that there is no other python as long as you. But you know, women, she argues with me. She argued with me. And Python said, of course I'm the longest python. There is no other python as long as I. And Nancy said, well, I agree with you, but how can we prove this? We must have proof. And the python said, well, I can lay myself out and you can measure me. And Nancy said, yeah, sure. I have just the thing. I have this very long stick. You lie yourself down and we'll measure you. So the python wriggled, lay himself down. And Nancy went from his head to his tail and said, you know what, Python? This is not quite working, because when I go this way, your head moves down a little. And when I go that way, your tail moves up a little. How about I get some of these vines and just tie your tail to the end, and then I'll go to your head and see how long you are. Python wasn't sure he liked that idea. Tie me up? And Nancy, are you sure you need to do this? Well, if we don't do it, my wife has won the argument. You are not the longest python. So Python said, okay, fine, tie my tail. And Nancy went, he got some vine, and he tied the python's tail to the end. And then he walked. He said, Python, you're a little wiggly in the middle. How about I tie your middle? I said, Nancy, I'm not sure about this. Nancy said, okay. I guess my wife won the argument. Python said, fine, tie my middle. But I'm not liking this, Nancy. Nancy said, I'm doing this for you. And Nancy tied his middle, the middle of the python. And then he went to the head and he said, we still need a little more tying. How about I tie your head to the other end, and then we definitely know you're the longest python. So Python said, fine, in for a penny, in for a pound. And Nancy tied. And as soon as Nancy had the python well tied up, well trusted up, he said, I got ya. Python said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm taking you to the sky god. Python wriggled and wriggled, but Nancy had tied him very securely. And Nancy took him up to the sky god, laid him out. Python was furious, and he said, ugh, but Anansi had done his second chore. Then Anansi went to get the leopard. He and his wife talked, and then they came up with a plan. Anansi knew where the leopard would be running, walking, and he dug a hole and then covered it up. And the leopard came along and fell into the hole. When the leopard fell into the hole, Anansi came out of nowhere because he heard the leopard roaring. He looked down, he said, "What's going on?" The leopard said, "Help me out, help me out." Anansi said, "Are you sure?" "Yes. Yes, get me out." So Anansi said, "Okay, the only way I can get you out, I am going to lower my web, the stuff that I make my web with. I want you to wrap it around yourself, and then I will pull you out." So the leopard said, "Okay, fine." And Anansi lowered the thread, which is sticky. The leopard wrapped it around himself, and Nancy tied it to a tree branch, lowered it. Whoops! Up came the leopard, well secured, and Anansi took him up to the sky god. The leopard was furious, but he couldn't really do anything, and Anansi had done his third chore. Now, Niame was getting a little worried because Anansi only had one more task. He and his wife discussed it, and he went to the area where he knew the fairies would be playing. And he made a doll. It looked like a person, and he put all kinds of sticky stuff on it, gummy stuff, resin from a tree. And then he put some food there, fufu, which is one of the dishes from Ghana. And along came the fairy, but Anansi couldn't see her, but he heard her singing. And when she saw the doll-like structure, she said, "Good morning." The doll didn't answer, but Anansi pulled a string and the doll's head nodded. And the fairy said, "May I have some of your food?" And the doll's head nodded. And the fairy said, "Don't you know that when somebody greets you, you should answer? Why are you just nodding, you silly person?" The fairy nodded. The doll nodded. And Nancy pulled the string. And the fairy got angry because, apart from being invisible, she was known as being very bad-tempered. She said, "If you do not answer, I will slap you." No answer. Slap. "Let go of my hand." Hand stuck. Slap. "Oh, you're asking for it. Now I'm going to kick you." Kick. Stuck. Kick. Stuck. Now she's stuck and she's tumbling around, still invisible, but Anansi knew she was stuck because he could see the doll rolling. So he just grabbed them up, took them to the sky god and said, "Niama, here I am. My fourth task. Now you must name the stories, the Anansi stories." And Niame had to keep his word. He laughed good-naturedly and he said, "Anansi, yes, you have completed all 4 tasks, and from this day forward, all the stories will be known as the Anansi stories." And Anansi was very pleased. He sang, "Joy, joy, my heart is full of joy." And that is how the Anansi stories got their name as the Anansi stories. Thank you for listening. I am so happy to be able to share these stories from the diaspora. Asante sana. Thank you very much.